Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Walking Down the Warwick Road. Joined, as always, by my co-host, Pete, and our resident guests, Roy Kavanagh and Roger Gardner. How we all doing, lads?
Good.
Very well, very well.
Very well. In sunny Manchester, Tim.
Yeah, lovely day round here.
No, it really is.
Chilly over here.
No, it's gorgeous, yes. Where are you, Roger?
I'm in Cornwall, so it's always
Oh,
nice.
my goodness, to say. Flipping
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice
Yeah.
one.
In Toronto.
We're here in sunny, snowy Niagara Falls for sure. Lots of snow on the ground here in Canada, which I think is to be expected. So, anyway, we are back today to dive into another part of United's history, or another all-encompassing part of United's history, the best bargain buys in Manchester United's post-war history. Pete, I'll come to you first. Why this topic? Why are we going down this path today?
Well, Tim, so our history is littered with big buys, many record-breaking buys, right back to the 1940s. But we thought it'd be interesting to look at some of the bargain buys that have turned out sometimes better than the big money stars. And I suppose, being pedantic, Pete, I had to put a definition on what a bargain buy is. And Tim limited me to no more than 12 words, so stick with me. So a bargain buy, for the purposes of this show, is that it's a player that's been bought that was relatively inexpensive relative to the transfer market at the time, but had a significant impact on the team or the club. And we've limited ourselves to 2 each, so by the end of the show, we should have United's 8 bargain buys from 1945 to present day.
And we should, first of all, tell people, get involved. We want to hear who your bargain buys were. So if you're watching, please get your comments in, and we'll post them up here and see who you think are United's best bargain buys. And also, as Pete mentioned, you mentioned, Pete, we've gone for 2 each. We realize that this list could have gone on and on and on for sure. But for the sake of time, we could have been here all day, I think. But for the sake of time, we've had to limit it to 2. So if we've forgotten somebody, or you think that there's somebody that should have been in, I think what it really came down to was, personal choice, I guess, for us in terms of what stood out and why we chose this player. But we all know that there's so many that we could have chosen. Right. Well, I guess we'll get right into it. And Roy, we'll come to you first. And if you could give us your first choice. This will be from just before the post-war period, I suppose, but right on through the post-war period as well. So if you could give us your first player, Roy.
Yeah, well, my first player is the legendary John Carey, and John joined United 1937, and he played up till 1953, and in that time. He was without doubt one of the United's greatest ever players. And when I say in that time, I mean one of United's greatest ever players of all time. In fact, if I am ever asked to pick my finest 11, he appears as number 2 in that team. And as you can see there with these great stats that Tim and Pete put up, he joined us from an Irish club, St James Gate. He was another one of the Louis Rocker signings. And I may be wrong here, but I don't think there's ever been a book on Louis Rocker, but he has a massive effect on Manchester United's history. And he cost the princely sum of £250. Now that's not 250,000 or 250 million. It's £250. And his impact on Manchester United was truly enormous. It really was. He captained them to the first trophy in 30 7 years between 1911 and 1948 when they won the FA Cup in a glorious final against Blackpool, and he led them to the 1952 title, and before he went into management. He also, around that time, in the period from around 1920 to about 1950, both the Irish Football Associations, one, you have to excuse me while I make sure you get these right. One was the FAI, which is the Football Association of Ireland, and the other one is the IFA, which is the Ireland Football Association. And they felt that they could choose any Irish person that they wanted. And so Johnny actually was one of a few who actually played for both the Republic and for Northern Ireland. And then in 1946, he actually captained the Great Britain side against the rest of Europe at Hampden Park in front of way over 120,000 people. And he actually was invited to play for both sides. But then when the Southern Irish, of course, were not part of Great Britain, so consequently he finished up captaining the rest of Europe side. He was also the second ever footballer of the year in 1949. Stanley Matthews was the first. And I think he's played in every shirt for Manchester United from the start of the game, except number 7. I stand to be corrected on whether he even played at number 7, but he appeared in every single shirt other than number 7 in a first team game, including goalkeeper, which was for a midweek game at Sunderland in 1952-53 season. And it just shows the difference in travel and things such as that. United had gone up to Durham the night before to play this game at Sunderland. And on the morning of the match, Jack Crompton, who was the goalkeeper, because Reg Allen was suffering badly from depression and things like that the year after he won the title, he took really ill, and the doctor said he just isn't fit to play. Now, it was an afternoon kickoff at Sunderland, and in a never to be forgotten meeting with John Carey, which if I've got the time, and buzz me if I haven't, John Carey, there was nobody could get from Manchester to Sunderland by car or by train before the kickoff. So consequently, John was asked to play in goal in the game, and they had a travelling 12 man who actually took his position in the field of play, but they didn't have a travelling reserve goalkeeper. And John actually had a great game against a very good Sunderland side who had a very dangerous centre forward called Trevor Ford. And United were winning 2-0, and they scored 2 late goals. Sunderland finished up 2-2. In Matt Busby's view, and I have this in writing, I've confirmed it, that John Carey was, of his time, the greatest footballer in the world. And I think considering the number of games and everything that he played, but also those significant positions and his captaincy material, proves what Busby meant. He did go on to have a fine managerial career with Blackburn Rovers, with Everton, Leyton Orient, who he took into the first division for the only time in their history, and then Notts Forest, where he actually ran United very close to the title in 1967. Interestingly, Tommy Cavanagh was his trainer. And I was talking to Pete only the other night, and it just occurred to me, when you think Wilf McGuinness's tenure when he replaced Busby, and Wilf cracks the famous joke that I just wasn't ready for the job, etc. It just makes you wonder if Johnny Carey had been alongside him as his assistant, with his hand on his shoulder, with all that experience. Because it was only 2 years before Busby retired that Notts Forest had come second to us in the league. And he just might have been that different and non-interfering non-interference, which I'm sure there was with Wilf. You could say, why would Jimmy Murphy not given that role anyhow? But that's an interesting one. If I've gone over my time now, I'll stop.
Yeah.
But we have one memorable meeting with Jimmy, which you could join or throw in at any time later on.
Well, let's take a quick look at some of the moving pictures of Johnny Carey real quick, and then we'll come back, Roy, and I'd love to hear that story.
Johnny led United in the FA Cup final win over Blackpool in 1948.
His service to United and to Ireland was truly remarkable, and he was as near perfection as one would get, and there'd be many in that category in United over the years. But to me, Carey certainly was the greatest.
I'm very pleased to have been taking this cup back to Manchester again after a period of 40 years.
You touched on it, Roy, the 1958 FA Cup victory. Before we get on to Pete's first player, though, Roy, why don't you tell us about your meeting with Johnny Carey?
Yeah, I will. I'll be as brief because I'm sure there's some great stories from the other guys and yourself. I can remember it vividly. It was the night United won 4-2 at Arsenal. 1983 League Cup semi-final. I'm sure Pete would probably have been there. I don't know if Roger was, but Pete probably would be there. And I was actually at John Carey's house interviewing him for a book that I wrote in 1983. And I remember he lived up in Bramhall, lovely detached house. And I remember going in, and a bit finger in the mouth, a bit ego tripping. There was nothing there shouting out what career he'd had, except on the mantelpiece was this statuette of the Footballer of the Year that he'd won in 1949. So over some lovely Irish whiskey and the conversation, a lovely warmth, and he occasionally put what was teletext in them days on just to see, because it wasn't live, just to see how United are going on. 2-0. Was it 4-0 at one stage, Pete? May have been. It finished up 4-2. And at the end, we both lifted a glass of whiskey and said to the boys, and he lived United. But I did have to ask him that, he must surely have some souvenirs. And he went upstairs and he brought this supermarket bag down, and he pulled out 5 shirts. And one of them was the England shirt he'd swapped with Stanley Matthews. Oh. The other one was a Welsh shirt he'd swapped with Trevor Ford. And on the back in those days, they used to have a white box with the number on, which was 9. And then he had one of the green Irish shirts that he'd wore for, I can't remember which one. And the final one was this sky blue shirt with lacing across here, which he'd worn when he'd captained the rest of Europe in 1946. And the final item in the bag was the ball from the 1948 FA Cup final.
Wow!
A true gentleman, honoured to have met him, and a legend in whatever lifetime you want to put Manchester United. Thanks very much.
Incredible. That's incredible. True legend indeed was Gentleman John. Right, Pete. We'll move on to your first player.
All right, so we're going in the chronological order. That's in terms of when they played for United, not age of the presenters downwards. Great stories, Roy. There, it's like having our own TARDIS.
Yeah.
I mean that in the nicest possible sense. You know that. So Tony Dunn, he played 18 professional matches, only 18 professional matches for Shelbourne when Matt Busby came calling in April 1960, just after he'd won the, funny enough, Roy touched on it, the FAI Cup in the Republic of Ireland, as it is now. Signed as an 18-year-old for just £5,000 as a right back. Now, he was bought as cover, to be fair, or for potential, I guess. But to put it in some perspective, later that year, a few months later, United signed also another left back called Noel Cantwell for £29,500, a record for a fullback then. So Tony Dunn was very much a bargain even at that stage. But in 60-61, he went straight into the reserve side. Just to set the scene, I guess, put it in some context, United were still recovering player-wise from the decimation of the crash at Munich. The club were grossly insured for those players who passed away or couldn't play again. I guess people never thought it would happen. Anyway, Busby had to bargain hunt for at least for the next 5 years, really. And when you bargain hunt, you often have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find the right type of prince, especially for Manchester United. You could liken it to the current situation. Anyway, autumn 60, and Busby is trying to build a solid defence. Goals weren't much of a problem, but we lacked a class back four. And that came at a cost, not having a good back four, because by mid-October 1960, United was second bottom of the First Division with just 2 wins in 11 games. Anyway, Dunn was thrown in. Tony Dunn was given a chance. Funny enough, he came on for the last 25 minutes in a friendly against Real Madrid at Old Trafford. They didn't have subs in those days, but you could use in competitive games, but you could use them in friendlies. 2 days later, he made his full league debut at Burnley, at Turf Moor. But that was a bit of a baptism of fire because the Clarets, as they are, were reigning league champions, and United lost 5-3. Funnily enough, Tony Dunn marked a guy called John Kennelly that day who had an absolute stormer, and United signed him a couple of years later. Anyway, he went back into the reserves and made only 3 first-team appearances during that 60-61 season, and he had to wait really a year to get a proper run in the side. And after a defeat, I think they lost 5-1 to Arsenal about a year later, so that would be October 61. Tony Dunn came in at left-back and really became a first-team regular after that. First of all, a regular, and then a fixture in a team Busby built that conquered England and Europe over the next 5 years. He totally made 535 appearances for the club between 1960 and 1973. Only won as sub, and that was in his penultimate game when I guess his legs weren't as good as they used to be. That number of appearances is the 8th highest in the club's history. And in 6 glorious years from 62 to 68, he won the FA Cup in 63, he won the league title in 65 and 70, and then played a vital part in United becoming the first English team to win the European Cup in 68. Bobby Charlton said, and I always value Bobby Charlton's opinion, Tony Dunn was in 67-68 the best left fullback in Europe. Now, the fella was only 5'6", but he could beat most opponents in the air. I rarely saw him beaten in the air. I saw the second half, probably most of his career. I witnessed it. His 2 really strong qualities were his tenacious tackling. He would just jockey attackers, but then get his timing right and win the ball. A bit like an Irish Bobby Moore, if I might say that. The other real quality he had, apart from the basics of heading and ball control and passing, but was his tremendous speed. So I've said he was an Irish Bobby Moore, probably an Irish Usain Bolt. It helped him get from the back of the field to right up, helping the attackers. Within seconds, he was a real sprinter. So he could effectively be a good fullback and a good overlapping fullback, which were just coming into their own then, really, in those times. He was consistent. He avoided injuries. He was Mr. Reliable. As a person, I didn't meet him. I don't get to meet the players like Roy does. And as a person, he was quiet. He was loyal. He was dedicated to the club and the shirt. And probably, I guess, Busby's first name on the team sheet once he'd become a regular. He was booked only once in his career for handball. Can you believe that? In 13 years. So booked only once, and that was for handball. I'm not saying he was booked only once for handball. Sent off once, again, when he was aging, just before he finished. Republic of Ireland international again. And then after he left Old Trafford, he was part of Tommy Dock regenerating United. I say he was a victim in that, if you will, in 1973. But he went to Bolton. I think he played about 180 games for Bolton and got him into the First Division in that time. So his career spanned a golden era in United's history. And Dunn was right at the heart of that. you hear of Besselaw and Charlton, you hear of Clarendon Styles, but some of the other players that were leading lights in that 5 or 6 year period, and Tony Dunn was one of those, Paddy Crerand, Shea Brennan. In my opinion, he was one of the greatest fullbacks in United's long history, and he cost just £5,000.
Incredible. Let's take a look at some of the moving pictures.
Although best known as a left-back, Tony Dunn played over 100 of his 535 games for United on the right. But whichever side he played, he always displayed total commitment.
But Tony was probably the first fullback I can remember here that overlapped and got to the byline.
And he's grey hard, very big heart, and he was totally Manchester United.
So just a wee clip there of Tony Dunn, but again, like you touched on, Pete, just a terrific player. Right, we're coming back to. I feel like me and Roger we're spectators at the moment, Roger, but our time is coming.
We are.
We're coming back to Roy here.
Okay.
And Roy, for another your second player, who do you have?
I have Stevie Coppell. And Steve was only 19 so when he signed for United for the ridiculous fee of varies 40, 50, 60,000 from Tranmere Rovers. But United's had some incredible number 7s. Billy Meredith, right at the beginning, Joe Silcock, who Pete remembered seeing the other night. Then we had players like Jimmy Delaney, Johnny Berry, who's a much forgotten number 7 for United, but take my word, he was a magnificent number 7. George, of course, made his debut as a 7 and played there a lot, but he played a lot at 11. Willie Morgan was a 7. Robbo, Brian Robson, Blimey, Kanchelskis, Cantona, Beckham, Ronaldo. We've had some great number 7s, but Stevie Coppell, when you look at their careers and look at what they did and how they played, not just individually, but how they played for the team, he has to be right up there, and for the ridiculous fee. In fact, he was spotted by Jimmy Murphy, who'd been advised to go and see him. And Jimmy watched half an hour of the game and came out and rang Tommy Docherty and said, "You're going to have to sign this lad before others do." And he joined United in '75. And his first game, I remember it was against Cardiff. And he was a substitute. And he came on after about 60 minutes with the score 0-0. Now, in the second division season, United, never really threatened to come out of the top 2 or even the top spot. But Pete will remember there was just a bit of a hiccup after Jimmy Holton broke his leg at Sheffield in the December. And then we got knocked out of the FA Cup with Walsall. We got knocked out of the League Cup with Norwich in the semi-final. We lost a couple of league games. Bristol City, I remember, one at home. We lost at Villa 2-0. And there was just a bit of a judder by the end of February. But Steve's first game was beginning of March '75. He came on after an hour's play, replacing Willie Morgan, actually. 0-0 the score, and it finished up at 4-0. And we may have lost the game till the end of the season. I can't remember us doing so offhand. And he instantly settled into the team as a genuine outside right on the wing, could beat his man, hard-working, a team player at all times. And of course, he then became one of England's great number 7s. He played 42 caps, I think, for England. And sadly, it was while playing for England that he suffered a really bad knee injury, which didn't end his career at that game, but it didn't help his career at all. Educated lad, he was at Liverpool University when United signed him. But only the other week, and I do apologise, Pete, but only the other week I was having a drink with Martin Buchan and about the 70s book. And and Martin went through a lot of the players, and because of libel, and I don't want to upset Martin's bank balance, I won't mention some of the downsides he mentioned of players. But I can assure you, he said that Steve Coppell was absolute gem. And Martin will have played with some bloody good Scottish right wingers at that time, like Jinky Johnson and Henderson. But he said, as a bloke and as a team player and part of our success, he should never be forgotten. A little bit like the man Pete's just mentioned in Tony Dunn. You know, these are players we can go. I mean, Tony allegedly had the saying. He never told it to me, but I heard it that he'd been in Eastern Europe somewhere, and there was a sign. It said Manchester United versus whoever, Best Law, Charlton, etc. And he said, "Oh, there I am, Mr. etc." And he was never a Mr. etc. And Steve Coppell most definitely wasn't. Magnificent outside right. You know, we should really remember these other players. I mean, I've just listed those sevens: Meredith, Delaney, Berry, Best, Morgan, Robson, Kanchelski, Cantona, Beckham, Ronaldo. And Steve probably won't be number one in a lot of people's choices on there. But I would argue why. He did the time, he wore the shirt, he won his games, and he played as a Manchester United player should do.
Indeed.
Of course, he had a really interesting managerial career after that, a bit like Carey. In fact, he was Crystal Palace's manager when it was Alex is defining FA Cup, really. He finished up at City, but he took Reading up as well. So, you know, a really, really fine player and an unbelievable signing. Thanks.
Indeed. Bring up a quick comment here from Bobby. Great show. Steve Coppell, what a player. I remember getting his autograph outside Old Trafford for the Cardiff match and wishing him luck. Terrific memories. I think Stevie Coppell, I've talked to obviously Pete and you guys about your memories of the 70s, and he's one of those players that always pops up for Reds from the 70s era that you know, he just provided them with so many great memories. Quick little video here of Stevie.
As well as being the best right winger in the country at the time, Steve Coppell was a rarity in football, a university graduate. Little wonder they said he had an educated right foot.
And can Coppell drive one? What a goal! What a goal!
Steve Coppell set it up. England international gets to the line, gets in behind Aston Villa.
It's just amazing to me that he's studying for an economics degree, and you touched on it, Roy. And he said to Tommy Doc, he said at the time that he could probably postpone his studies from the uni, and United was adamant that he graduate, or that he continue his studies. So that was amazing to me, right?
As with Alan Gowling, a few years earlier.
Yeah,
he went on.
Terrific stuff. Thank you so much, Roy. All right. Over to Roger, and out of the 70s, and where are we heading for your first player, Rog?
We are going to Paul McGrath, who used to play, believe it or not, with Steve Coppell. Steve Coppell was still around. I nearly went for Steve Coppell, but Roy beat me to it. So let's get on to Paul McGrath. He only cost £35,000. And at a time when United were known for splashing the cash, he proved to be a bargain. Played over 200 times. Put it into context, Mark Higgins, who signed for United in 85-86, nearly cost twice as much money as Paul McGrath. There's Big Paul, or Macca, as Ron Atkinson called him. So nearly 200 appearances. And we should have a clip of a really, really good Paul McGrath goal in a minute. I think for me, alongside Martin Buchan and probably Jaap Stam, probably the most cultured central defender that I've seen watching United in the 40 odd years it is now. I think I've stopped counting. His job really, according to his biography, was get the ball and give the ball to somebody else. But it was his Irish counterpart in the United side, Kevin Moran, who used to say to him, you know, you're so much better than just playing in central defence, Paul. Come forward. use the ball and show us what you can do. So for me, as I say, he was completely cultured, got great pace. He could head the ball, but also very, very confident in distribution. And really part of one of my favourite United sides in that era of sort of 83 to 85. And again, I think we've used the term Rolls Royce. I think Ron Atkinson actually described Paul McGrath as a Rolls Royce. And according to Brian Robson, when Brian Robson was asked, Paul McGrath was the finest player that Brian Robson played with at Manchester United. I think he played obviously at a time when United was searching for that elusive league championship, and that United side was maligned really for sort of being wasteful, and they gave the league away typically in sort of February and March when things got tough. But don't have the misconception that United couldn't defend in those days. Going even the disastrous end to the 85-86 season, when United capitulated, we only conceded 36 goals in that particular season. And in fact, given the injuries to Brian Robson with his shoulder and with his hamstring, Paul McGrath was relied on more and more. And in fact, I think the clip you'll see that we've got from Anfield shows him in midfield. And he actually scored a fantastic goal that night that I know you witnessed, Pete, didn't you? Oh, I can't hear Pete.
He's got himself. You're on mute, Pete.
Sorry.
Thank God. Oh, sorry, Pete.
I did. It was a really good League Cup game. Liverpool were very, very good then. I mean, they were champions of Europe 3 or 4 times in that first half of that decade. As much as it hurts me to say it, they were. But United gave them a good show that night. And Paul McGrath, converted that night from a centre half to midfielder, and he scores this type of goal that we're gonna show. Superb,
incredible.
Yeah. So he joined, believe it or not, in 1982 when Ron Atkinson was trying to sort of move away from sort of Sexton's team into one of his own. And obviously Martin Buchan was coming towards the end of his United career at that stage. So Kevin Moran typically had Graham Hogg, who was a Scottish defender, actually a pretty good player. And famously, I think Graham Hogg's best night was probably when United beat Barcelona at Old Trafford in March '84, when he had Maradona in his pocket for most of the evening. So McGrath wasn't in that side, but he did make it into the semi-final, which United played in the Cup Winners' Cup that season against Juventus, when United narrowly went out. So he played both of those games in '84. He did make the '85 FA Cup winning side, and on the route to Wembley, United played Blackburn Rovers in the 5th round at Ewood Park, and another really great performance from Paul McGrath. He scored another goal from midfield. You can find on YouTube if you'd like to see it. So for me, a great all-round footballer. He went on following Manchester United. He had 1 or 2 off-the-field problems, which he talks about very honestly with alcohol in his book. And I think Sir Alex Ferguson was keen to break up the drinking culture at United between sort of, Paul McGrath, Steve Bruce, Brian Robson et al. And it's quite sad to know, I don't know whether you guys realise this, in 1989, when Paul McGrath played his last game for United against Southampton, that was also Norman Whiteside's last game. So the sort of the marking time really of Ron Atkinson's side finally falling apart was when Whiteside and Paul McGrath both left in 1989, when things had really got very, very difficult for Sir Alex Ferguson. And I think he later referred to the fact that he cut United too close to the bone, really, and let too much quality go. But Paul McGrath went to Aston Villa, where his career was resurrected by Graham Taylor, whose managerial stock was quite high at the time. Taylor went on, of course, to manage England. Paul McGrath stayed at Villa and then was later managed by Ron Atkinson again, and Paul McGrath won the League Cup, didn't he, for Aston Villa when United were chasing the treble in 1994. So I don't know about you. I don't hate Manchester United players when they leave, particularly if they were good players. I was always really sad to see Mark Hughes leave. Mark Hughes came back, and I've always had a soft spot for Paul McGrath. So there you are, guys. He's my choice.
And quite imposing defenders as well, Roger, wasn't he? His physical stature, he was big lads.
Absolutely. I mean, there is some really good games against Liverpool in that era where, obviously Liverpool had some serious quality, but his timing of tackles and his pace across the pitch was phenomenal, and he's right up there for me.
Okay, well, let's take a look at that goal that you were talking about. Yeah, tremendous finish, and then like we were sort of said right at the end there, just you could the way he's winning things in the air, just big imposing character.
Yeah, I mean it's worth saying actually. He was man of the match in the '85 FA Cup final when we beat Everton, and he ended up playing with Frank Stapleton at the back after Kevin Moran had been sent off. So I think Paul McGrath was looking after Graham Sharp, who was, some player for Everton. And I think poor Frank Stapleton had to look after Andy Gray. But that goes down as one of my favourite days in United history for sure.
Go on, Roy, you were going to get in.
Yeah, just a point, guys. The first 4 signings that we've discussed halfway through cost just short of £100,000 in total.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Right. Well, Roger, cheers, but we're staying with you again. Who's your second choice?
Well, I mean, I almost went for Dennis Irwin. I'm very, very fond of Dennis Irwin, but I didn't go for him. I'm more of a flair man. I go back to the Doherty era, as you know, and Hill and Coppell down the flank. So I've gone for a guy called Lee Sharp, who was a Black Country lad, who United signed from Torquay. He was playing at Plainmoor on a YTS, believe it or not. And United relatively splashed the cash, I suppose, at £300,000. There you go. You can see that was 1988, £300,000. And he got a good number of trophies, despite some awkward injuries that actually probably robbed him, a bit like Steve Coppell, of more trophies if he'd been around. I like him because he marks really the start of Fergie's sort of success, really. Between 1988 and 1989, United were really struggling. Mark Hughes had come back to Manchester United. United had finished second in the league the year before, but there was still some considerable distance between United and Liverpool. And the start to the 88-89 season just didn't go well. And Fergie was scratching around for a team that was going to win games and entertain. So round about the turn of 1989, we had sort of Ferguson's first sort of dabble with youth. I think he looked at the ageing United side in 1988 that had finished second and realised actually they weren't going to go any further. So Fergie's fledglings, as they were dubbed by the press, featured people like Lee Martin, who went on the year later to score the goal in the Cup replay, Tony Gill, David Wilson, they were there, and Lee Sharp. Lee Sharp was actually the most successful of Fergie's fledglings. Jesper Olsen had gone off to Bordeaux, so Lee Sharp had his opportunity on the left for United. Occasionally, he was sort of deployed as a wing-back at the back with Lee Martin, and on other occasions, he played further forward for United. But I don't know why, but Ferguson dabbled with Rolf Milne as well. He came down, I think, from Bristol City in the end. That signing wasn't a success. So then we went to Danny Wallace on the left-hand side. Sadly, Danny Wallace had to retire because of a neurological injury. But credit to Lee Sharp, really. He had injuries and he kept playing various roles in the team. And we've got some goals later of probably Lee Sharp's greatest moment in a United shirt when United were on the way to the 1991 League Cup final when they'd come up against Ron Atkinson's Sheffield Wednesday. On a particularly good night for United at Highbury, United won 6-2. Lee Sharp wearing 7, I have to say, Roy, as well. So perhaps Lee Sharp can qualify as a United number 7. He scored a particularly good hat-trick. And I think for me, that United team of sort of 1990 to 1993, 94 were just so exciting. And they had, as much flair, I think, as I've ever seen in a United side. Obviously, famously, Eric Cantona was in there, but you had Mark Hughes who'd come back and doing well, Kanchelskis on the other side. And there was just so much quality, and not forgetting, of course, Schmeichel and people at the back as well. So there was so much quality in that side. I just loved Lee Sharp's cheeky nature. He was a really good finisher. And he gave United entertainment, I think, during the dark days of Ferguson in 88, 89, when we needed it most. So it's a short case for Lee Sharp, I think.
But a good one.
Indeed.
Well pointed out.
Let's take a look at the goals.
Sharp pinching it back from Dixon. It's a beauty! Tackle, set up Owen again. Great cross, Sharp, great goal! Still United going forward in search of more. Lee Sharp, hat-trick hunting. He just won't believe this night is happening to him.
Really well taken goals too. Go on, Pete.
Brilliant, Roger. Brilliant choice. And you're spot on with it. He made that link between the aging team that Atkinson had left, Fergie, and the start of getting in fresh blood and attacking wingers in United's tradition. But I was there at Highbury that night as well for the 6-2. So we had the 4-2 in 83, 6-2 a night match again in the League Cup. What we got to remember is, I would say, to put it in perspective, Arsenal were champions that season. In that season, we beat them 6-2 in the League Cup. They were champions, and they only lost one game all season. And yet, in the season, we went and won 6-2, and Sharp took the champions to pieces. And I just have one little memorabilia because we got home very early in the morning, about 6 o'clock. And when we've had a win like that, I always go and buy a paper. Not bought many lately, but I bought a paper, and on the front was Mrs. Thatcher leaving Downing Street in a car through a window with a tear in her eye. And on the back was Lee Sharp's 3 goals at Highbury. 2 iconic moments, I think, in politics and sport.
Indeed. Another comment in here from Poppycorn, longtime watcher. It's so frustrating watching teams that just can't do the basics. Steve Coppell made it look so easy. Surely crossing a ball is part of being a professional. On the other wing, maybe more flair. So good memories there from the 70s for sure.
I noticed Lee Sharp on social media this week mentioning that 6-2 game, and he said, and Pete will have been to both of these because he was at Highbury, but he said the Saturday United went to Everton and won 1-0, and he got the goal there when he did his wiggly hoop, and he said that was a great moment as well.
Was it Arsenal that he scored against Arsenal where he did the microphone celebration with the corner flag?
No, I think that was it. Well, yeah, I think he did it both. I think he certainly did it at Everton, didn't he?
Did it a couple times.
He did it against Barcelona at Old Trafford when he scored the equaliser.
Yes. Yeah.
He kind of backheeled it, side backheeled it, if you can.
Off a cross too, wasn't it? I think it was off a cross. It was an incredible goal.
Yeah.
Right.
We won't talk about the replay though.
yeah. Right. So, well, cheers, Roger. Two great choices, obviously, and back over to you, Pete. Who's number 2?
Right. Well, so
sorry.
No, Roger has taken us on into the 90s, which of course is every United fan's favourite time. We might be pushed with the 60s and with maybe the 50s, but anyway, the 90s, certainly the number of trophies. But I'm gonna make a very, very bold statement, and I don't really do bold statements. But my choice for number 2, best bargain, is Eric Cantona. And I will say this, in my opinion, Eric Cantona is the most important signing Manchester United have made in their 144-year history. Okay, all about opinions, but just to set the scene, unless you live through it as a United supporter, it's very difficult to explain to someone who didn't live through it and supports United just how tough it was from 67 to 93. I'll say 92 at least, but 25, 26 years, okay? And I'm not going to go through all the years, don't worry. But by the end of that quarter of a century, we'd won cups, we played good football, we were still the main headliners in Britain and Europe, but we weren't delivering what we should always aspire to, which is to be champions of England. And you wouldn't have believed it in 67 and 68, those years, if somebody had said we'd go through the 70s and 80s and into the 90s without being English champions. So by 1992, we were pulling our hair out because it had been 25 years. Even worse than it being 25 years, the title was going almost every year to Liverpool. Okay, so that made it worse. Even worse still, in 91-92, we'd capitulated in the last 6 games. We'd lost 3 out of 36 and then lost 3 out of the last 6 and gave the titles to Leeds. So how much worse can this story get, really? 25 years, Liverpool win, and then when Liverpool don't win it, we hand it to Leeds. As the Premier League dawned in 92-93, okay, Reds wondered whether we could repair the damage, if you will, of giving Leeds the title, or just giving the title away. It wasn't that much that it went to Leeds. Could we pick ourselves up and go for the title again? And by late November, we had the answer. No, we couldn't. We were lying after 15 games, 10th in the table with only 5 wins, and we'd scored in those 15 games 14 goals in the league. Okay? Don't worry, it gets better from here. On the 27th of November 1992, the world changed forever for Manchester United supporters. I was in the gym, the YMCA gym cafe.
YMCA. Oh, sorry.
That's for another podcast, Roy. I was in the gym at the cafe at the YMCA, as Roy sings. And I did used to enter the gym as well. I didn't used to spend all my time at the cafe. I was waiting for my girlfriend who used to train with me, my now wife, the current Mrs. Molyneux. And I was welcoming her after we'd both finished work and we're about to go to the gym. But the news, there was a television in the cafe. And she saw that I was somewhat distracted by what was on the news. And I just turned to her and I said, bloody hell, United have signed Eric Cantona. Bloody hell. And probably, it must have taken 5 minutes for that really to sink in. He'd been the guy who'd taken Leeds by the scruff of the neck the season before during the running and won it for them, basically. And he'd landed on these shores and everybody knew then who he was and probably how good he was. But United signed Eric Cantona. And I remember probably about 10 minutes later when I had said a proper hello to Louise, that I just whispered under my breath, well done, Fergie, well done. None of us knew, of course, what was ahead. But what we knew was that we'd stolen a great player and from our rivals. In that 25 years I talked about, we'd had many false dawns, big signings, great starts, superb managers, but we could never deliver the league title. We knew Eric was different, but we didn't know it then if it would work. I think by the Christmas 92, we had a good idea of it because he started to look, the team settled down and started to look like champions. By May of 93, of course, we were champions of England. And a year later, United had won their first ever double. So we'd won 2 league titles on the run and won the cup. 2 years later, he'd won the double again. Well, not he'd won the double. although he kind of did with his goals in the running and his goal in the cup final. United won the double, the first team to ever win the double twice, and United's first time they won the double for the second time. A year after that, in 1997, we were league champions of England again for the fourth time in 5 seasons. And as unexpectedly as he'd arrived in November 92, by May 1997, he'd gone. He'd retired. I was doing the garden. I heard it on the radio because he announced it midweek. And I just sat there, not so much sad, but I just wanted to take stock of what a marvellous contribution that man had made. And on the slide there, it says just 162 appearances. We're not talking about longevity. A good scoring record, 82 goals in those appearances. But the keenness, if there's such a word, how important the goals were during run-ins and finals was second to none. It was vital. And he was the man that took United, I believe, from good to great. Him alone, he made the difference. He was the catalyst. And as well as delivering the trophies and the trophy we wanted in the league title, it always it also provided us with some great football. So I repeat, I don't do bold statements. I repeat, Eric Cantona is the most important signing Manchester United have made in their 144-year history.
Just a tremendous player. We've talked about it a few times in the past on the podcast, Pete, is you just brought, and you touched on it just now, he just brought that confidence. It was that last piece after they had missed out to Leeds the season before, just that last bit of confidence to get that squad over the top into the next next level that they needed to win a title.
Yeah. I probably should have asked briefly. In the year we didn't win the league while he was there in '95, because he was banned. He got banned in the January for he slipped, and this Crystal Palace fan was in his way, and they made a big case out of it. But he couldn't play for the rest of the season from January to May. And we'd just beaten Blackburn Rovers, who won the title. With Cantona's goal, we'd just beaten them in the game before that Crystal Palace match when he got banned. So I think even the Blackburn fans would admit we'd have won 5 in 5, but let's not be greedy.
And another double.
Sorry?
And another double, because we got beat 1-0 in the cup final.
Yeah. I think as well as him being the most important signing, he was also the cornerstone for the modern United. I don't know if the present day United would be everything that came after that, another double, a treble, the treble, and everything Fergie delivered. Who knows? That was a real sliding doors moment signing Cantona. I think everything we've had, which has been everything our wildest dreams in the last 20 years, Cantona's signing was the cornerstone.
He had an impact on the squad for sure, didn't he? With people like David Beckham, I think.
Yes, good point. Yeah,
Bobby Cornyn, Cantona must be the best ever risk-reward signing ever. We certainly were rewarded. Great shout, Peter. And Bobby was in again with a comment on I believe he's talking about the Arsenal game that we had shown with the clips of Lee Sharp. That Arsenal game was when I started to believe in the Fergie era. So,
I started to believe then as well, because I was. Eventually, I ended up as an evangelist of Fergie, but I was a Judas at one stage, and it took those Lee Sharp games for us to get some foothold of belief that this man could turn our club round. So I agree with Bob Lofty. Is it? Has just said that.
It was Bobby Lofty. Yeah,
Bobby Lofty. I concur 100%.
Just one point there. Just imagine we'd have won 6-1 yesterday, like we should have done. It could have been Ralph's moment.
Yeah.
If we'd have had Cantona, we would have done.
Well, exactly. And I have to say to him that, Roger, I do agree entirely with Pete. I mean, I put Dennis Law alongside him because, I mean, I saw, his whole career at United. And that was the same captivating moment when Law dragged everyone up with him and made the team, what they were. But two fantastic signings. But Law was a world record at the time, so
yeah.
Indeed.
I think you could say the same about
Right,
Brian
well,
Robson.
I
you
guess
know.
yeah, Robson, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Another tremendous number 7, indeed.
Stick to the rules, guys.
Right, I guess it's over to me for the last two, and I went for my first choice with the baby-faced assassin, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, signed from Molde in July 1996 for the whopping sum of 1.5 million pounds. But when you see what he delivered for us through his time at United, in terms of bargain buys, just incredible. 11 years at the club, 366 appearances, 127 goals. Most goals for United as a substitute with 28, another incredible stat. And then you can look at the honors of what he did there. He was actually United's plan B. They were going for Alan Shearer that summer. And he was the backup, was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And I remember reading an interview with Gary Neville that when they first saw him in training, or when he first turned up, they thought, who is this? Who have we brought in here? What kind of impact is this fella going to make? But, that the 98-99 season alone, the treble season, you look at some of the goals that he scored in that season, Liverpool and the FA Cup at home to carry us through with a late victory. Obviously, we know what he did in Barcelona at the Nou Camp in the final, scored somewhat of a big goal, I suppose. But Middlesbrough, he scored 4 goals as a substitute against Middlesbrough that season as well. So just incredible, an incredible talisman. Some players too, when they come in, you wonder, are they going to be okay with their role as a substitute? And he embraced it, never caused a problem in the squad. The harmony was great. I remember going to watch United train at the Cliff in 98-99 when I was over there for the Villa game, and got a chance to see him up close. And he's bigger than you think he is. He's got a decent size to him. So just a tremendous player. And show some of his goals here.
I can't enlighten the folks at home. Solskjaer!
Beckham into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it!
So real poacher, but he could obviously score goals from, he was decent in the air. He could score goals from range. Just a tremendous. Fergie called him either one of or the best finisher he's seen. And with the amount of players that Fergie has seen over his time, that's a hugely, and good players, good forwards. That's a huge compliment for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And for some of the, I know when he was manager, he got a lot of stick towards the end, but and social media can be a bit of a beast sometimes. And some of the things that were being said about him on social media were just, I think it's important to reflect on the fact that he was an absolute legend for the club in terms of his playing days as well. So incredible.
Tim, the fans in the ground, even when they kind of towards the end were getting to wonder if Ollie was going to get out of it, and some of those terrible defeats last autumn, never turned on him, and now they still sing his name, not wishing him to be back as manager, just giving him the respect he deserves. Twitter and the real world are two different things, I think David Cameron said once.
Yes.
I don't usually use David Cameron quotes, but that one seemed appropriate. A legend, a hero, and he won for us with that goal, the treble, and we are the only English club to win the treble. The European Cup, your title in your own country, and the cup in the FA Cup in your own country, the main cup. So Ajax have done it, Bayern have done it, blah, 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 blah. Only Manchester United have done it in England.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Right. And for my second one, and again, I guess a bit of personal choice here, but I've gone for Chicharito. So again, another tremendous goal scorer. He had 20-goal season in his first season for us. We bought him from Guadalajara, CD Guadalajara in the Liga MX in Mexico. It was a player that United had been looking at. He came in April 2010, and it was a player that we'd been looking at since 2009, but he sort of started bagging goals for his club and then started bagging goals for Mexico. And Mexico once they'd qualified for the World Cup in 2010, United decided that they were going to wait, but they decided they had to make a move for him. So they sent chief scout Jim Lawler over to Mexico, scouted him for a good month, and then came in with a bid, which was accepted of 6.75 million, but 157 appearances for United, 59 goals. And again, it was that title-winning season. You can see there, Matt Busby Player of the Year, 2010, 2011. It was that first season really that, you know, he was just terrific for us. Scored some really key goals, particularly not only in the league but in the Champions League as well, to get to the final. You know, he scored. He seemed to be the scourge of Chelsea over the years for sure. But in context of that fee, we paid 6.75 million for him. And that same summer, we paid 8 million for a tricky left winger by the name of Bebe. So in context of the fee and what we paid, you know, paying that for and we've seen over the years how the fees have increased, but paying that for him sort of at the start of the World Cup, and he actually scored 2 goals in the World Cup. He had a good World Cup for Mexico, so a bit of shrewd business there for United to get in and get him early, for sure.
Good choice.
And
Great ball in! United score! Fernandez coming in again! And what a substitution that has turned out to be!
Yeah, just a tremendous, really, really good player, good finisher. That game against Villa where we were down 2-0 and he came on as a substitute and pulled us back. And I always loved too how enthusiastic he was celebrating his goals. He just loved to score goals, and he loved the club. He loved United. He's playing over here currently in America, the LA Galaxy, and he still speaks fondly in all the interviews that he does over here of his time at United. Just said the other day that he's a Red for life. So tremendous player. But you're just on mute, Roger.
Interestingly, you've gone for 2 similar players United would have died for in the 70s and 80s, because we just hadn't got a finisher that could stick 20 goals in the season in the net. You know, Gary Birtles sort of tried and failed. Alan Brazil tried and failed. Yeah, nobody could put the ball in the net almost.
I've just done a little mathematics, gentlemen, and it comes to just under £12 million. The lot.
Just
12
incredible.
million for the 8.
That's absolutely incredible.
Wow.
Good business. Right. Well, that's our 8. And you know, I think we can all agree, as Roy just pointed out, there was excellent value for their fee. Right. I'm gonna put you. I'll put you guys on the spot then. So out of those 8, if you had to pick one, which one are you picking? I'll come to you first, Roy.
Johnny Carey.
Gentleman John. Roger?
But Cantona does take some beating, but sticking to the script, Johnny Carey.
For all the reasons already said, I think it's probably got to be Eric Cantona. You know, he was the sea change moment for me.
Pete?
I know I went on a bit about Eric Cantona, but one thing I forgot to mention is I did meet Eric Cantona. I got a part as an extra. True story. In Looking for Eric, because they filmed it in Worsley next door to Ryan Giggs' house.
Yeah.
Roy will know this because it's the moneyed end of Worsley. But anyway, you just had to go forward and put your name down for this production company, and you don't see me because we all had Eric Cantona, Eric Cantona masks on. Probably a blessing. But anyway, on the final day, he came to the set, Eric, and met the fans. And they were all United fans or FC United fans who followed United. And he spent time with us, having photographs and chatting away, and just a lovely fella. So I'm 2-1 down in terms of players we met. 2-1 down to Roy, but that's not a bad result. I go for Eric Cantona as per my non-bold statement.
Right. And I think for me, I'm going to stay true to what I said, and I'm going to go with Solskjaer just in terms of what he delivered in the treble season. Delivered United's greatest ever season, honors-wise anyway. So I'm going to go for Solskjaer myself. But tremendous. Let us know what you guys think. You can get a hold of us at Twitter at Warwick Road Walk. You can there's a link there to catch all the episodes for all our podcasts. But let us know who your best bargain buy is. Obviously, there's so many that we couldn't name, and I think it was a difficult selection for all of us. But I think we've done some of United's really good bargain buys here, some justice, chaps. So thank you very much for everyone that watched and got your comments in. Thank you guys for Roger and Roy for coming joining us in for this episode, and thank you Pete as well for providing us with your insight as always. So for Roy, for Roger, for Pete, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time on Walking Down the Warwick Road.
Thanks for the invite. Good guys. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.